Hi, everybody. Welcome to the penultimate, the ultimate, the ultimate stream of Let's Watch Film for this cycle. We are talking about Cade Cunningham of Oklahoma State. I'm very excited to talk about Cade with Anchorage man Seth Partnow. How are you doing this evening, Seth?
I am doing just fine. I am hoping that the derecho we have coming through town does not knock out my power while we're doing this.
I'm sorry. The what?
The derecho. It's a weather. It's a weather front of strong winds that is at least 250 miles wide. Is apparently the definition of this phenomena.
Were you familiar with this word before?
I had heard it before. I didn't know the technical definition. I just knew it was like a big windy thing that wasn't necessarily a tornado.
Okay. Yeah. When you said that, I assumed that there was like a super villain type situation. Um, of course, I have some meteorologists in the chat who are very disappointed that we don't know. I'm not going to speak for you. I definitely did not know, specific types of long straight line winds. So I'm really excited to have you because I like talking about the draft with multiple different perspectives and also like with people who aren't inundated with this year round, where like your brain gets warped by having to do it all the time. So what were your priors coming into Cade Cunningham? Like, not obviously you've watched him before the stream, but like, or before the film for the stream, but like before the start of this cycle, what was your general perception of Cade and how has that changed during the draft process?
I mean, the word that really came to mind from everyone I had kind of talked to about him was feel. It may have been you, it may have been someone else who described him to me as a good decision making machine, and so that's sort of that primed me for a certain type of player, which I think on what I saw this year was largely borne out.
Yeah. So like your first game for him was this year generally. You
Yeah,
hadn't seen any of the Team USA stuff.
it's the wonderful thing about no longer being responsible for draft opinions is being able to skip some of the deeper research.
See, that's for me. The deeper research is the best part, and when they get to college is where it can get dicey.
Fair
So
enough.
for me, I think I became aware of Cade either between his freshman and sophomore year, maybe, when he was still playing in Texas. Yeah, dude, he was like the same sort of thing. Like a dude who just processed the game at an extremely high level, was, had the physical tools, but like didn't. He played the game like he was much shorter mentally. Like a dude who's like, yeah, I need to get through this problem with as much mental fortitude as possible, rather than just like being able to hit the "I'm super talented" button, which is what you find a lot in prospects. Watched him play for Montford, where he was one of the best team ever, in my best high school team ever, in my opinion. U19 team where he shot like 9% from three. And the concerns with Cade Cunningham that we heard before the year was that like, he was a guy who always won, but how big of a part of it was he really? Is he just making the right decisions? Can he go get a bucket for himself? And in a lot of ways, he picked the perfect school to solve that particular problem. Because I do not think that you can watch Cade at Oklahoma State and have those same questions. There are other questions that occurred, but like he simultaneously solved the mentality questions and the shooting questions at the same time. And I don't think there's ever been a bigger narrative shift in a player that I can remember during their draft year. Like in a way that like they remained in the top five, but like the theory of them entirely shifted in how broad NBA people and people in the NBA ecosystem like
So
responded to them.
it's sort of shifted. I would imagine sort of those questions got answered, but now there's sort of some tools questions, right? Like to handle the explosiveness.
Yeah, and I think there's also questions about like, what exactly do you do with him? Like I guess when he was, a connecting piece, with some degree of use, like there's a pretty standard guide on what you do with that. But like what do you do when he has like what we would consider star skills, like, shooting almost half of his threes off the dribble, taking only like 70 catch and shoot jumpers, a staggering number for a guy who's a catch and shooter. I would say grades at is in like the 90th percentiles. I think what I have written down. Um, so yeah, this is I think pretty fair to say almost unanimous number one pick. I mean, there's still a chance that Detroit does pick Jalen Green, but like just talking to most people, how do you generally approach situations where like there's a broad consensus as you enter the draft cycle?
Um, Again, since I sort of try to insulate myself from the consensus, I certainly when I was doing this team side, that would sort of inform the players I needed to watch. The top, the tier one guys would be the top 1 through pick a number between 20 and 40, and I kind of needed to be aware of them. But beyond that, the start of the cycle is too early to have any sort of strong priors about who the best player is. With the one notable example was Luka was sort of what it was sort of, but that had the benefit of kind of he had almost the preseason of Eurobasket that was kind of as that cycle was really starting, and then he's the best player at Eurobasket. So what are we talking about here? Sort of became a pretty easy one. But beyond that, just trying to let it breathe a little, because so many of these guys come in with reps, and then they get exposed to both higher level competition and commensurate size and athleticism for perhaps the first time in many cases, and that's a pretty rude system shock that sort of has a pretty strong sorting mechanism, I think, for the guys who are just like the I am more talented than you, and therefore I can do what I want and I can play basketball. And we're looking for the latter because with very rare exceptions, the former is not something that translates to the NBA level.
No. I mean, with Cade specifically, I mean, he was on one of the most talented high school teams ever. I believe it's going to have 5 first-round picks, and the number could get to like 7 in time. It's a pretty talented team. So let's flip on over to the film tab. Welcome in our wonderful guest. You can see what we got here on the mirroring, Seth. Just double checking.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
When you do a marathon stream, everything goes a little bit wrong, and so I've had to do quite a bit of behind the scenes. So we are good to go. I have not seen a single audio complaint, so it seems like we are great. So
awesome.
I want to talk about just like the basic stuff. To me, the central Cade Cunningham conversation is the assist. It is not a meaningful indicator of passing ability. It is probably the most contextually dependent statistical measure that exists on a box score. Everything else kind of comes with a degree of explanation unto itself. And the assist is just like, it could literally be anything. It is entirely subjective by the scorekeeper. It is entirely subjective on whether it means something or not. And to weight it properly, I mean, a turnover is sort of similarly so.
I was gonna say that.
But
like
turnovers
both sides
happen less. But turnovers happen less than assists, especially as a primary. So I think that the frequency makes it a little bit more warpy. So I think that when talking about Cade, you can look at the assist numbers and be like, I don't know if he's, that good of a passer. To me, as somebody who has watched him since he was, 14, 15 years old, that's like one of the wildest things I've ever heard. Like, to me, the idea of like, I don't know what level of passer is he, is I'm like, excellent. Next question. Like, is he the best passer in this draft? No, Sharif Cooper probably is, because he can do things that like just are sort of like mind bending in the approach to physics. I would consider myself like
is Sharif Cooper 6'8" with a 7'2" wingspan? Which,
no.
That's like,
and that is very meaningful.
Yeah,
if Sharif Cooper was 6'8" with a 7'2" wingspan, we would cancel basketball. Like it'd probably be over. If he could move like that and be 6'8", we would probably have some considerations about folding the league. So I think that like in any conversation about evaluating him, this speaks to his context, but I also find those conversations kind of boring. It's like, how are we weighting passing? How are we looking at it? If you use synergy cutouts or just assists, you're not getting a full picture. If you're just looking at box scores, you can get a partial picture that will tell you things about what is happening with the team, but it's hard to have greater takeaways unless you have a definitive understanding. Are you with me so far? Any of this
Absolutely. No, it's funny just because I know what clips we have, and it's just like you literally have to watch 20 seconds of this game
Yeah.
It's like, okay, no, he can pass.
Yeah. By the way, this is not an agreement zone. If I say anything that is wild, by all means, jump down my throat. The second one is slow right by you. This is a quote that is stuck in my brain from some pros who played against Luka. When describing why they couldn't stay in front of him, the answer was like, he's too slow. And every time that you think he's going to go one speed, you're never going the same speed as him. He might go from 5 miles an hour to 2 miles an hour and then back up to 4 miles an hour, but you can never be on his level for a long enough period of time. And while Cade doesn't have the same excellent deceleration, he's not like on that level. He's also just like not as burly, a little wider on the shoulders, but not as burly.
And we can get to that. And I actually think that's one of those things that that's a worrying factor actually for me is, I mean, you almost want to see him be a little burlier because some of the advantages that Luka creates and maintains, it seems like Cade can't quite yet, though he has the frame that, one would think that strength would be reasonably easy to add, but that's one. There's a lot of one would thinks that you start to pile those up and all of a sudden, you combine those probabilities and suddenly there's a big chunk of maybe this guy ends up not being as good as we thought he was. So you can't just wish away all those little, man, he needs to get better and that needs to improve.
Yeah. And I think that like when you're looking at Cade's handle, if you're kind of just looking at moves, like there are real problems with it. I have problems with it. I think that's a real concern. But the way that he wins is by slowing by you. It is by the interaction of deceleration, of strength, and now of shooting. And that makes for a combination that doesn't show up the same as somebody like Bones Highland, who's just like has a liquid handle. And it's just like, no, like whatever you think I'm doing, the answer is no, I'm going to do something even wilder.
As an aside, I know he's not the best player in this draft, but my absolute favorite player in this draft.
Oh yes, is Yves Pons is actually my favorite. If we're just being honest, because Yves Pons doesn't. He's like if NBA or NFL Street and you had the turbo button. If you had the infinite turbo key, that's what he plays basketball like, and I love every second and truly believe he will be an impact NBA player for some point if he can shoot. But yeah, we're just talking favorites. But Bones is so awesome. If you'd like to know more about Bones Highland, we do have a marathon stream that's up on YouTube that we do talk about him. Just a small plug. The third one I have is the Processing Olympics because Cade is just a Rolodex of decisions. And this draft, I think one of the things that's really made clear to me is separating scoring load from decision-making load, which is another way of just saying how much processing you want somebody to handle. And Cade's value to a team is directly proportional to how much offensive and defensive processing he is requested to do. So like heliocentrism is an idea, but there's multiple ways of creating like the burden of heliocentrism. It doesn't necessarily have to be with ball in hand or with 50 usage. It can be like, he's the captain of the defense. He does all the talking, which is, basically what the situation was heard. It can be by, starting breaks and then running the second pick and roll. I think that there's a lot of ways to get to like the theoretical 10,000 decisions in a game. And that's kind of the way that this is also why assists don't really capture entirely what players like Cade do is like, just you want him making as many decisions as possible because on the whole, he's going to make more good decisions than bad. And his bad decisions are things like generally think I can
fix. And to that point, especially for a player who has the ball in his hands as much as you probably want Cade to, but might get, the opposition will do things to get the ball out of his hands. Making the pass early to someone else. The assist is never going to be anywhere near that, but just finding the crease that comes from the extra attention you're getting, regardless of whether there's any sort of like stat that attaches to it, is another way in which a guy can sort of break a defense without it showing up anywhere in kind of traditional statistical accounting. In almost the same way that like a good movement shooter can break a defense without ever touching the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things we struggle with is that decisions only count when the ball's in your hand. Like that is a form of thinking that just like people like it is inherent to be like the decisions that matter most are the ones with the ball in hand. It's like, well, you have to choose how you're coming off every screen. You have to choose, do you shake off 2 or 1? You have to choose whether you're showing inside or showing outside when coming off a pin down. Like there's so many of these decisions that are like, oh, that's just doing your job. It's like, well, yes, they're basketball players that requires a degree of decision making. It's not, this isn't to be reductive. I just think that like we do not think about thinking enough when we discuss basketball.
No, I think that's absolutely right, because and not to turn this into a meta discussion, but what else were we going to do?
Yeah.
But no, we focus we like broadly speaking, and I think we've gotten better about this. Like I think that the people on sort of draft Twitter who are getting into stuff, like really examining, again, my preferred nomenclature for it is feel, but examining all those little micro decisions that players make dozens of times a possession, and doing that well is the difference between, can you play basketball, or do you just have these physical skills that can be displayed in a sort of a more discrete setting rather than the continuous nature of a basketball possession.
Yeah. I think that flows really well into the fourth, I think, the fourth of these like central ideas, which is gravity versus attention versus spacing. They are three concepts that can be synergistic. They can all be presenting on a possession. You can have one, you can have two, or you can have negative of all three. You could have no attention, no spacing, and no gravity, which I think would be like
we'll see some, I think, on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like that's sort of like the slander version of Ben Simmons. Like the version of Ben Simmons when he plays bad on Twitter is the negative of all three. I don't necessarily think that player is what's actually happening, but you can find a screen cap that'll say basically anything. I think that you kind of get you have positions where you kind of have to create a dialectic of these ideas and understand how their interplay works. And also, I think this is the central question of like, how much of Cade Cunningham shooting do you believe in? Because his senior year high school stats are not public. He's reported to shoot over 40%. The public stats don't look great. He was an okay shooter in UIBL. Did poorly in U19, and then shoots the lights out as in like the true public sample as a freshman in college. There's a way of looking at this that's being like, yeah, so this is the outlier. And if you believe that this is the outlier, like gravity and attention are less important, and spacing for him is going to be extremely important. If you believe the shooting is real, then it's about how much gravity will he have. I think these are interesting questions because it's better than being like, oh yeah, there wasn't any spacing, or oh, the context was poor. It's like, yeah, but that's not a fun conversation. It's fun to be like, what is the least amount you could do that would make these possessions more interesting, and how many NBA teams will be able to meet that threshold? That's fun, rather than being like college spacing is college spacing. It's like, yeah, it's college. Like, sort of reflects it.
And I don't think it was just the spacing that I think that's the way that like Oklahoma State was bad for Cade because they didn't have spacing. I don't think that's almost reductive, because it's they had a lot of guys who wanted to do things with the ball in their hands and weren't necessarily good at doing that. So that means even when they were quote unquote spacing, it wasn't real spacing. It was almost, okay, Cade's going to do something cool, then throw me the ball, and then it's my turn to shine. Mm-hmm. And that, that's not just guys who can't shoot. It's guys who not only don't shoot, who record scratch and do something else.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are levels beyond record scratching that we probably need to come up with new terms for. And the last one is a fun question. And it is best defensive utility. I think in the Moses Moody stream, I called it optimal defensive usage, and trying to think of archetypes of defense as sort of as a usage percentage of sorts. And like, we're a long way from that sort of operant defensive statistic, but starting to think towards that of being like, how many possessions do you want them on a primary? How many possessions are they the tagger? With Cade, I think he can defend some fives, like long term. Like he was holding up against college fives like reasonably, and he wants to box out, which makes it a lot easier, especially if another team goes small. So like, I think that there's some really fun questions there. I also think when people say like someone has low potential, like we generally think of potential as the ability to have cool mixtapes and not like win basketball games. Again, Cal Bridges seen as low potential, but like he won playoff games for the Suns. If that is not like one of the best potential outcomes for a franchise, getting a guy who swings playoff games, like I really don't know what we're talking about here.
Exactly. What are we doing here?
Is it vibes? If it's just vibes, tell me it's vibes. I can deal with that, but don't just like put it in front of the curtain and say like, oh, it's this other thing. We can do better. Just don't let him say it's not vibes. Okay.
Are we getting into the difference between a basketball player and a hooper, or are we just going to leave that alone? Okay, good.
And the last thing is this is an average game. With Cade specifically, I chose a game that had a lot of turnovers. Because I think that speaks to a lot of my points. I also think that turnovers are often a quite good thing. We will get some very interesting college turnovers here. That being said, it is very easy to make Cade Cunningham look truly awesome, and it is also pretty easy to. I don't think he had that many bad games, but there are some games where he looks like a dude who's kind of stat padding a little bit, where it's this is not impactful because it's just teams are going under, they're forcing him to shoot, he knocks it down. It's we didn't learn anything here. I think that's what I'm trying to say. There are times where if you choose certain games, it looks like there is not a relationship between the contents of what he's doing and the context of the game. All right. With that being said, with a nice meaty intro, let's jump in to. We've had a lot of blue bloods during the past 14 hours of streaming that I did yesterday. We have Big Monday at Kansas and their phenomenally large logo. I love a big logo. With these games, I try to find teams that ask NBA questions. And Kansas certainly has the frame, the X's and O's, and just general things that I think ask NBA questions broadly. Ref kickball early, love to see it. And with that, we will get into our first series. So here we're gonna get an Iverson with a crowd on the weak side into a pick and roll. Kansas, like a lot of teams, decides to try to put a smaller guard on Cade and crowd his handle. The handles can be a little dicey. Here, I believe we get this is a Spain action. They have an exit that they will tack onto this later. And Cade's just reading the weak side. If you're going with the tagger, ball goes skip. If you don't go, if you stick with the shooter, blob over top. He really loves to wait on decisions and really be certain what's going to happen and force a hard commitment. Where I would say Sharif Cooper does the opposite. Sharif is going early. Sharif, the second that you make your choice, it's out of his hands. Cade waits a touch longer, I think, to get a harder commitment. I would like to see some of those decisions get faster. It feels like he needs a level of certainty that I don't always love.
The flip side of that, you might say that's where the physical ability comes in, because again, he's sort of on this one, he accepts a little bit accepts the double team and still knows, yeah, I can get that pass there, I can throw it over the top, and so it's not he doesn't get he throws that pass when he wants to throw the pass because he knows it's open and he's just waiting for the right time to throw it. So again, I accept what you're saying, that you would probably want. There are times when the first opportunity is the right time to throw it, but having the ability to sort of suspend the animation of the play and wait. Okay, now, and do it, and that's where the size, both height and wingspan and vision, really, I think, allows for kind of putting weak side defenders in kind of treacherous spots.
Yeah, I think that's certainly one of the imperative questions is how much does he put what is the best possible way for him to put defenders in challenge? Is it to go early or to go late? And I think that you can make an argument for the earlier side. I just I like him when he is more gambly. I get that is. I think it is easier. I side on the John Thompson side of I would rather have a guy who's a little too wild and try to rein it in than coaching a player to do the opposite, where they are trying to that's bad. They are trying to make aftermarket adjustments to be hey, I'd like it if you made more mistakes. That's generally seems to be harder coded.
Right.
That people will have different answers, but that's mine. Here we get another pick and roll, switch, attacks. We can see deceleration, nice little shoulder, and I think one of the most important things for Cade is the really high release. Unfortunately, I cut this so that it is a little bit off screen. I'm going to bump this down again, just so we don't need as much of the score. But I think with him getting part of the shooting improvement is that like there's just not dudes who can really challenge his stuff at the apex in college. Like he's able to release this at a height where like even if he doesn't create a ton of separation, the release is still super high for a 6'8" dude.
On the other side, you like as you say, not a ton of separation, not perfect balance, not much elevation, and so you do wonder if you're talking about if that's Mikal Bridges to bring up someone like what is this kind of situation look like?
Yes, that is certainly a question, and I think a very good one. But like, I think the release can also get faster. That is another really important thing for me. Is that like the amount that I've seen it speed up since his junior year of high school to now leads me to believe that it's certainly possible for him to speed it up more. A concern that I have with him is that like he has some struggles. Like he's a fairly big dude, like maybe not by NBA standards, but like for 20-year-olds, he's pretty built as a wing prospect. His hips are a little bit weird, especially fighting around screens. He likes to go under or like stay connected, but if he has to get disconnected and slither, he doesn't have a ton, especially when it's in his upper body. When his feet are underneath him, does a pretty good job of getting around. We have a couple other clips of that later, but we can see like when he has to tilt and you get like put through the Reggie Miller maze, as I had a coach call it, and his shoulders start to move. Then he can like he'll have leg kickouts, and he never really sells that to try to get an offensive foul. He's not doing that as a flop. He legitimately is getting caught and taking bad angles there. This is the gravity question. So Cade, this is a pick and roll, and his man is the tackle, and his man is terrified of leaving him open. Enough that this is a pretty wide open dunk. I think that the amount that Kansas respects his ability to shoot, and not just because like he has to get going for this team to win, but also just like the fact that it is threatening enough that like a dunk keeps like there's usually a guy in that scribble, and he's nowhere close because like the threat of Cade Cunningham on the skip is that powerful. I don't know if NBA teams will treat it that much so. He certainly was not hesitant to shoot, especially on catch and shoots when he had the opportunity. But we're talking about this is a meaningful amount of college gravity. Here we have double drag, and we get this little mid post look. I mean, it's very that's a little bit on screen. It's very 90s to have a guard wing prospect just like do 12-foot seals, and so Cade is just going to like fight, try to get push upper body, try to get a lob upper top. Gets called for this is one of his turnovers. They just called this a foul for reasons that I don't super understand. But like, I think that he has interesting post stuff. It's definitely going to be if you cover him with the guys who get under his handle, he's just going to throw them in the post. And the physicality is clearly not an issue. Like Marcus Garrett, really does want to battle and Cade, football background side by side, not an issue. I don't think that archetype's also like the most effective against him. I think there's other types of dudes who give him more problems than dudes who get under the handle. This is your processing. A lot of bigger guys struggle with early pickups. Cade has that problem occasionally. I just did Moody, and Moody like is a headache when it comes to early pickups. This would usually be the spot. He takes 2 extra dribbles, drags them out. I'd like to see this as a lob. Right now it's throwable. Instead he tries to frame hands to try to find the perfect angle. He overframes and gives enough time for the second defender to get a deflection. But he is manipulating that weak side guy into believing that there is a skip on the way. I don't think it was necessary. I do not think he was getting to this if you lopped it or throw an immediate bounce pass. Do you have any concerns about his passing repertoire as it exists? Like he seems to be a better passer than he does have an amount of passes. They seem to like be kind of from like over the shoulder angles, over the head angles. It's not too much super wide, nothing in the underhand sling variety that we see with LaMelo. Is that any kind of concern for you?
The margin for error just because of the frame makes some of those, I guess, unnecessary. But I take your point that they could easily become necessary when you add 3 inches and 30 pounds and athleticism to everybody else on the court. So I mean he strikes me as someone who isn't doing things for ostentatious reasons. So he doesn't throw those passes because he's never needed to throw those passes. Now that could be, me being, narrative guy, but there isn't a lot of frill to any of his movements, and so that's of a piece with
it often feels like he throws crazy. The wilder passes he throws, I feel like if you stopped the game and asked him why, he'd be like, "Oh, that's the pass that could go through." It's not because like, "Oh, I wanted to do the things like John Morant's about to do," where he's like, "I'm going to manipulate this rookie and Bradley Beal into not knowing what they're going to do." And like, is that the right decision? Yeah, you could definitely have manipulated them that way. Was it also a fun thing to do outside of his frame? Yeah. And John Morant loves doing that. Yes. And I think that like getting these elements of outside the frame, selling fakes harder, selling, options harder is a thing that like has a level of improvement as Cade, gets more flexible and gets to experiment in the space a little bit more, to borrow the music metaphor.
Explore the post up space a little bit.
There's some passes I just don't see him making at his current limitation. Like this tray window is super small. Off a snatch with the left, it's just off left shoulder, but like he's throwing it into a small window. Again, Kings fans, I'm really sorry. This is just the best clip that was in the highlight. I do not target you guys as much as you may think so. The Wizards also seem to have this issue for whatever reason. It's almost like being bad at defense makes it easier to clip the offense against you. But like, my worry with Cade is that he will miss some opportunistic windows because of the limitations of his repertoire, at least for his rookie year. Like, he'll be able to make these passes. Like, obviously, if he had, pump faked high and then thrown like a bounce, slung out with the right, that's possible. But I just want to see him manipulate, like, access these smaller and smaller windows with just like quick ones and a variety of pass types. Not necessarily, like, I think he has all of the pass situations, but it's not necessarily all of the release locations and spins of that. Like, because he has, when has he needed to? Like, the wildest pass I've ever seen him throw is he timed up between the legs on a cross court bounce pass. He threw it between a defender's legs. It was truly wild, but like, he's not throwing bendy passes. He's not throwing passes with heavy weight or with backspin or anything like that. He just doesn't super need to, and everything just kind of comes off from 3 or 4 release spots.
But the one thing is, we'll get into this probably with his handle, but he's also, I don't think he is at present creating that window. Now, maybe because of, because he has so much of a wingspan from side to side, maybe that, maybe he just by extending his arm, he can create that window. But I don't think I'm not sure that he, as of right now, really is shifty enough to get the defender leaning enough to kind of throw that over his shoulder.
Can I make maybe a more deep lore possible explanation?
Yeah.
That like the elements that of proprioception and hand-eye coordination that limit his handle also limit his passing currently, and that they're not related, but they're linked, if that makes sense. Like, it's a sort of a root general cause, and that like it's a thing that he's going to have to sort out with, I would say, like some particularly intense types of training. And that like as one improves, suddenly the other one will also improve. Not just because the windows are easier to get to, but because like he will have that hand-eye coordination, that arm release point flexibility,
sure.
and then the natural creativity that comes with like, all right, so now I can do all these cool things. So time to throw them at help side defenders.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the flip is the left hand is. I feel like he's a long way from making this pass, especially with his left hand.
Out of a snatch, most definitely. I think he can throw the pass itself, but the contextual elements of the pass are probably a no. And like this is the thing with Ja. Like, Ja throws into these really tiny windows that exist because of how quick his hands are. Like, this pass is kind of there. Like, he's throwing this window open like a lot.
Yeah.
But like that window is there for that quarter frame, and he's able to basically out of a crossroad be like, oh, it's there, and he flicks it out. And I just don't think that hand speed is there currently, and I'm excited to see how that develops in his first couple of years. This was one of yours. I think this ball was off the backboard.
No, I just sort of the early break on the pass that then ends up being an open three because it hits the backboard and bounces right to the guy he left.
The accidental reverse Chris Paul pass.
Yeah, like
he's getting the steal, 100% getting the steal.
Yep. And he's that's you talk about decision making. That's a full count early before the guy's even decided. Oh, that's where the pass is going, and he's already taken a full step there, and then it bounces off the backboard and goes right behind him.
Yep. Basically a 0.1% outcome is the thing that ends up killing him.
Yeah.
But 99.5% of the time he's walking the other way for a nice little dunk. The defensive processing and the ability to order outcomes is really impressive. He also loves a box out, which is fun. It is fun to see somebody who's just like, no, I'm gonna box out. His team also needed it, but like I do think that's a thing that is encoded in him. Is like I should put him get a real box out. I think that if you wanted to get a head start on one of those like random ESPN crawlers, like players over 6'3" that have gotten the most over the back calls in their first like 50 games, I would put good money on Cade being one of those guys.
I'm not sure that's a stat that would be easy to look up, but 100%. Something I'll be on the lookout for it next year.
So yeah, here we go. Hard hedge out of pick and roll. Teams just try to get the ball out of his hands, and gets into a switch after the hedge. He takes shots that I did not think he could take in terms of like distance of defender. Like this is a foul, but the shot perception to be like, this is something I can get off. This is something that is available to me is really encouraging, because for a lot of guys, they struggle to see themselves as open and feel themselves as a possibility of scoring. It's a huge jump from the player I saw at U19, and those micro development pathways are always super interesting to me, to see how players see themselves and see how they perceive their abilities in space. 2 years ago, he's not taking the shot. Like, especially out of like basically moves that don't create space. It's a between the legs, and then he's immediately rising up. There's not like a hard sell into that. It's just like, oh, you're not covering me close enough, and it turns out they have to foul.
Is there anything that worries you? He gets the switch and then doesn't really create much from there.
No,
that would be.
I mean, I think that he's waiting for like a better. My read on the like between the leg series here is that he's just waiting for this clear out a little bit more and then going. I hate it when people pull back out on switches. It's just a personal thing. We're just like, you're not more open than you were prior. Like right now, you could just go. There's still going to be a dude sitting on the block. There's still one in the dunker spot. I think he's just waiting to see if there's a bite on the hezzy or anything like that. But I think it is a concern what happens when if he doesn't go immediately in the league and the shooting takes a small dip. Because like if you're a guy who processes a ton, you need to process advantages, and if there's not an advantage that comes from the shooting, if there is a physical point of attack differential that's strong enough that he's not able to get 2 feet in the paint, which is a thing he does. Like for a guy who does not really have as advanced a handle as you'd like from a primary ball handler, the dude puts 2 feet in the paint all the time, and if that isn't happening, I have some concerns about how like really mobile. Like if you go super small, like if Jeremy Grant switches out on him a bunch, like there's some concerns there. I'd like to see a lot more grift, a lot more like jump in and foul me. He seems to at times be overly committed to playing straight up.
The concern for me is it's not Jeremy Grant necessarily. I think as 2 or 3 years into his career, I think he'll have the physicality to get to a spot there. It's like, what if that's Brook Lopez? Okay. And he can't attack Brook Lopez's feet to do anything but like get kind of a not even really a step back, but just kind of almost a lean back.
This shot.
Yeah.
Shot, that like a thing that I will say a huge difference between him and Moody specifically is that he really understands how his jab series works, and he gets shifts into like here we're getting pushed no middle, everything's towards that really overloaded side where there's 3 OSU players. He's able to get a shift, and now it is middle just by sliding just the foot. He doesn't even move the ball; he just moves the right foot. He gets the separation that he needs. He gets 2 feet in the paint. And then it's just like the punch decel. And here we see the difference between gravity spacing. Like, there are 5 guys extremely well spaced, right? Like, if you were to make these
Kansas
plays,
doesn't care,
and they just don't care. Like, attention, you have 5 people who are basically ready to try to contest this shot. Some of them return back to their men to find box outs or whatever. But like, the level of attention given to Cade Cunningham is intense. The level of gravity that his defenders have is very low, and the amount of spacing on this particular possession is very high. And that makes for some pretty interesting. Like, if he doesn't shoot this, what exactly is he supposed to do? That was my note on this one. Was like alternate choice, and then just like 7 question marks. So, do you think, like, I guess it's the kick out to opposite slot? It seems
but why?
Nice. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
like, I mean, that's sort of, there's a little bit of a KYP there, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I in a different team context, like maybe the strong corner, maybe, you know, depending on who any one of those guys, it could conceivably be right decision to, like, it could be like a, you know, a cross back to you know, hit the guy kind of drifting into the slot at the top, right? But none of those guys are really threats where they are. So this is probably, unless he's going to back it back out, like, or go into a back down. What else is there? Yeah,
I mean, those are some of the questions that, like, when people say context, I think this is what they mean. I'm interested from a player development standpoint how he incorporates this iteration of himself back into, I think, his preferred role, which is like doing enough that he gets to have fun making as many decisions as possible without shooting. That being said, like, we get a fine jumper out of this. Like, he creates an amount of space. I'd say a fair amount of space. It's not as good as other guys with his physical profile. Obviously, I'm comparing them as NBA players to him as a prospect. Like, I'm not digging into.
It's again, my it's not so much the separation. I think he creates a fine amount of separation. It's just then it becomes almost a sort of a flat-footed lean back as opposed to
I think he has some issue with people's feet. I know he broke his ankle as a freshman in high school, and that's why he like didn't try to dunk for a long time, because he just, like, the crowd scared him, because that's how he broke his ankle. I think he has issues with people sliding under his feet. It's like, it seems to be a thing. Here's Chris Middleton with the same move. I'm really sorry, Kyle Anderson. Chris has, like, I would say Chris is a worse decelerator, but Chris is a better general mover. So he's able to action it a little bit more. I think just Chris has his moveset more figured out at this point. Obviously, Chris is just the second best player on a championship team. But these are the pathways for development where it's like, you don't have to get a great handle. You just have to get the one that works well enough that your body can do it and people buy it.
Well, and Chris plays, he's confident enough in his handle, even though he's got a pretty high dribble, but he's confident enough that he can play with the ball so wide from his body that then, like, a move like this is, you know, that's whatever his wingspan is, he's covering that much horizontal space. And Cade is playing much narrower.
Yeah.
With the ball, because he, especially with his left hand, I don't think he feels confident getting the ball kind of way out here and manipulating it.
So here we have exit. Again, I like a lot of Oklahoma State's playbook. It's just the defense, gravity exists in the defense mind. So here we have exit, and the read is the high man here. Doesn't tag, ball comes out. Like, it's a well placed ball. Everything, you know, generally lines up. Again, slightly later than I'd like it. He really gets the ball. It could already be out. Obviously, we're doing this in slow motion.
That seems pretty nitpicky.
Yeah, I mean, but this is what separates. Like, I think that I came into this draft thinking there was no way there was going to be a better passer in this draft than him. And
I mean, I think I would take issue with you saying, like, just in terms of, I mean, this is in stride, and I don't know if this pass is completed if he throws it earlier, to be frank.
Yeah, you'd have to put more weight on it, but I think that, like, it is a thing that I've kind of started to see in just comparing him to Sharif and doing the, like, dives on player passers of that level, where it's just like there's not that moment's hesitation where I can see him being, like, getting the commitment he wants. And again,
doesn't throw lob as well as Ed Cota.
Yeah, like,
demerits.
Yeah, it is not as Wake Forest Chris Paul evil as it could be. But it's just a thing where it's like I understand his processing more after this year than I did previously. Where like he is very much a person who just wants to make the most efficient decision at every single moment, and like it is cold. It is cold to a point where at times he could have earlier windows and chooses not to throw them just to make sure everything works, which is like I think a reasonable solution when you have these teammates. As a shooter, he's a hop shooter. We're gonna just go through the shooting generally. It's a little bit arm heavy. You can see here that like his legs are fully extended and he's still at the upwards motion with like coming from his dip up. Generally, you kind of want it to be sort of hear everything coming to a crescendo, so a little bit misaligned. But the hands of it are fantastic. Here is a free throw from Montverde as a senior, and there's a little bit of elbow inside. Like you can see that it's collapsed. That's what created sort of like a 1.5, like a more of a 1.5, almost a 1.75. And that's been pretty smoothed out. It's not a 1, but I would say it's firmly 1.5 right now. That collapse is gone. It's smoother. You could just see that he needed reps. Here we have a couple different options. So you can see that collapsing has turned sort of just straight up. This is the exact one. 1.5 comes out smoothly. The release itself is pretty good. You have sometimes he shoots with a middle finger. I generally prefer index finger only. But good motion, like good rotation, clean ball. These are, again, with Cade, I'm trying to pick nits. Otherwise, this will turn into a very uninteresting thing where two basketball guys say positive things about presumptive number 1 pick, and I think that's bad television. And I've done it. I've done it before, unfortunately, or streaming or whatever the phrase we're saying here.
I would say the other just picking up from that. He's got enormous hands, right? And so on the free throw, you see the guide hand is almost on top of the ball, and that seems like it's like even just on these, you can like that seems like it's cleaned up a ton, and so it's becoming there's nothing that's going to impart like any sort of side spin on that motion.
It's also like why people who are like worried about him shooting. Like again, I never really was. It was just like there's so much clean even when he was shooting poorly. It's like this will get figured out, and there's no flaw in his process as a shooter that would make you think he wouldn't have versatility. And oh boy, did he have that this year. As a scheme defender, he clearly understands every scheme that's being asked of him. I think that if you weren't familiar with what Oklahoma, like if you're just watching this game, like, oh, no baseline. It's like, no, they're going to double that baseline. The big's going to
trap in the box.
Yeah, they trap in the box and everybody over rotates. He's good enough that he can trap in the box and then like instead of just cutting off, like instead of going hip to hip. Yeah, this one's tough. Instead of going hip to hip, I'm going to cut this back just so I can talk through it. Instead of going hip to hip, he really like hunts the other angles and tries to make sure the only pass that you can get is directly back out to the corner. He doesn't sell his moves great. Like this is a lefty in and out, or it's a lefty cross that like sort of looks like an in and out, and this defender just stunts and hops. Like he knows that Cade is not going to throw this lefty, and that the move he has, it just isn't sold. I think that a lot of guys with his physicality can have moves that like really work. We're about to see one that sells the ever-loving hell out of his moves. But with Cade, it's the idea of having if he can add just like a little bit of oomph into the handle and maybe just a touch more. There's so much positional positives on defense. Again, just like a processing Terminator, especially on defense. It's just this stuff where it's like, man, sell this move just a little bit harder. You probably have something. Instead of like you start to see him cross, can you counter out of it?
Or even if it's just not like the over the top cross, even if it's just a low hard one.
Yeah.
Like it seems like
he does the Tony Parker one here. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Tony Parker, you dribble
like
it
he's gonna push the ball past him and almost like almost a soccer move.
Yeah. When I've taught this move, I pretend that like it's the cigarette stands that are like about waist height. Just imagine that you're just dribbling right on the other side, and those stands sort of like flare out at the base. So you want to put it over it, but you also kind of want to just get it on the other side. And he does that. It's like, well, the guy's not reaching, so that's not going to work. He's just stabbing. Any other move, I think in and out works. If he just hezzies, he walks by to the left. Here's Taylor Horton Tucker essentially doing the exact same thing, but on the right hand, where it's a light hezzy. We can see the defender gets ahead of him. He slows down, and then Taylor slows right by him. Just the exact same, like Taylor is obviously much more fluid, but it's the same body type. It's the same physical and athletic profile, just with more fluidity. And by having, he doesn't need to get to Talon's range, but just by having more of the fluidity will allow him to access. Again, there's nothing that complicated about that move. It's just a big, long, strong dude stops and starts a little bit, reads the defender at the right time,
and and there's at least one play in this game where he actually does that.
Yeah.
I think it's he basically does that right hand hezzy and hits someone for an open three in the corner, which of course he misses because it's Oklahoma State. But like you do see him do that at times.
Yeah, like I feel like at times when we talk about handle, we can like mythologize the overly expansive handle. Like Kyrie has every move in the world. This move is literally not that much. I feel like almost every person in this chat can physically do this movement. The timing is the thing that's difficult. Like it's just not that complicated. It's just getting it at the right time and then exploding a little bit out of it. Again, I'm really sorry, Kings fans. I'm not doing this on purpose. Or am I? Here we have another pressure. Garrett's a good on-ball defender. Doesn't get great contact on this one. I believe we have another exit. So we're reading that top defender. And additionally seeing what's going to happen on that bottom side for the corner three. They love to show high, just try to limit the looks that he has, and he just walks into a light DHO and tries to do the pass and set a little baby screen in case that there's a late flying closeout. This is good processing. This is the layered read. We will see them run this play a number of times, and he makes a different read every time.
Man, you worry about the left hand there, though.
Yeah.
It's just it's interesting. An interesting thing to me is despite like having some weakness in his handle, is he doesn't get. He's like I'm kind of fumbling the ball a little, but I'm still not panicked.
Yeah,
and that's a very interesting combination of I don't know if it's irrational confidence or what it is, but it's like I got it. But at the same time, he's on the verge of disaster out at half court.
Yeah, I mean, he loves to do like the putting his chest to a sideline and putting a shoulder into a defender's chest at half court. But this in and out he does here is better. It's just like if you trust a big, like why wouldn't you have them hard hedge that and push him middle? Just be like, no, change into your left. Like sit on your left and then bring somebody from the blind side. That's at least going to make him think about his weaknesses. Which like if you just let him keep going right, he seems to be fine. That isn't that much problem. Here we got a middle pick and roll. I think the screen work is generally good. Here a little bit of an early pickup, but I included the end of some of these plays just to show like what happens when Cade doesn't create against good teams. Like I don't mean this as slander. I don't mean, but like a lot of his decision making is from this reality. The thing like doesn't necessarily show up on if you just watch the synergy cuts. It's like his decision making is informed by the fact that like if the more degrees you go away from a Cade Cunningham decision, the less likely that the team is going to be positive. And so, like, this is, past the point of an assist. And every moment that you're away from a Cade Cunningham decision, the less likely that things come positive. So he is more likely to force stuff and try to make sure things happen that's beyond his reach, because, like, this stuff does occur when he's not involved.
Is that one in a situation where as the left hand improves that he can actually snake back under on the big, and because there's
I think that he's okay at setting up screens. He really was in high school where he would just like walk into defenders to push them down and then into the screen.
But this is another spacing gravity sort of disconnect here.
I think that so much of what Oklahoma State is trying to do is timing based, and if you over set up defenders, it allows defenses to throw 26 amount of help.
And wingspan, that's not a
and getting back to a neutral stance where advantage is lost is a huge success. Considering if you just showed the screenshot of him peeling off the screen, said how does this possession end? You'd probably think that you get a much worse outcome than baseline J and him closing out for a rebound. Ghost pick and roll. And then at that point, it's the second cutter pops, and you have it was most likely a high low, and you have corner if the ball gets entered, and then the screener is going to shake down to the slot, so you're putting a ton of pressure on. And like this is not a complicated set, but the understanding of angles is great. And Cade just like that corner has to be covered, and he gets the guy to sink, and he's battling against the center, boxing out against. I mean, Kansas likes its centers big, and he does a reasonable job. This is the stuff that like I'm just not worried about him in any way on defense. Like I don't probably want him defending like super quick ones, but like off ball, it's just going to be a ton of fun. And then here draws 3 defenders. He knows he has the center crashing, and the weak side has 2 responsibilities. And he just picks out. Picks out a right. I don't think he's making that pass lefty. I agree, but he throws this a million miles an hour, and it hits exactly where it needs to hit. I like how, again, he's pretty confident under this amount of defensive pressure. I don't feel like it changes his release angle at all. I feel like when guys get sped up, they throw like a little bit of loopers, and he just pushes this. Real quarterback hours on a rope cross court.
And the extra dribble to force the help side defender to pick one.
Yep. This is another good, like, I think this is, I when I was watching this, I kind of separated out like bad drives and good drives, and for more of the bad drives, I went back and was like, does he have 2 feet in the paint? And if the answer is yes, I'm like, how bad of a drive is it really? Because considering the amount of defensive load-up we're facing, and against broadly NBA athletes, here we get that same Tony Parker crossover, goes with the behind the back. I think that there is a pathway for him being a real free throw tank, especially as he gets more craft. It's just the slowing behind you. He has to figure out exactly how he's going to do it, because the behind the backs haven't worked for him, and I think the answer is low crosses. It's just like you talked about earlier. Again, we go back to Chris. I'm not comparing these two. I'm just noting dudes who have the same physical profile in general. Athletic skill set. He's in jail. Something that I would love to see Cade work on more going to his left. Low cross. And, like, you would never think Chris Middleton blasts by Josh Okogie. Like, that's not a sentence that really makes a ton of sense. But because he understands where and when to use his crossovers, where he and when he understands, the angle work, he's able to just turn Okogie into pudding. Like, Okogie's going to battle to try to get back to point of attack, and that's exactly why. If you put a slower defender on Chris, this move does not work, because he's still reacting by the time Chris wants to.
Right? No, he's reading left to right crossover, and he just leans a little bit, and then Chris just goes left.
Yep. Luka obviously is ludicrous at this. Luka is also fantastic at his last step. A difference between Cade and Luka is, like, Cade's last step every single time creates meaningful separation, and I think Cade struggles to get that same thing. Cade's first step on Euros is great, but his second step is not violent like Giannis. It's not super bendy like Shea, and he's going to have to find how he wants to close the last step of his drives. Because right now I feel like he's taking a sort of generalist approach, and he's going to need to specify into wherever his specific finishing approach lays. And, like, I don't think he's strong enough to do, like,
I think you said the right word there, is strong enough, because that's sort of the hip and core strength that Luka has to pop up off of one leg. There is a lot of the against Bam. Yeah, but there's a lot of situations where Cade does play a little up and down, a little straight up. And I think that like being just a little stronger, kind of in his haunches, I guess, if you will, will allow more of that kind of he wants to take his time, and that's the kind of thing. This is the kind of movement that will give him that time.
Yep, I just think that he needs a little bit more specificity in his last steps and in his general finishing approach. Yeah. At times it feels, I don't want to use the word basic, but just like it doesn't feel tailored to what he does best. Yeah, it's like you jump off, he's probably a 2-foot leaper and he has a +6 wingspan. There's a lot to figure out there. I just feel like he's kind of still working through the driver's ed of it all. Stutter rip. My favorite move in the entire world. Get a retreat. They're going to set up a little step up screen. This is one I think he under processes, which is a really interesting one. He immediately hits this. Immediately hits the pocket pass. I think if he takes another dribble, there is this left-handed skip. I think he's avoiding the left-handed skip.
Does he have that?
Yeah, because that's just not like a left-handed skip. That's a left-handed skip off a hook because of how his shoulders are tilted. You can't just baseball pass it, which I think you can probably. Like, you could probably baseball pass this. It's not a particularly difficult skip as far as the angles of work go. But, like, full hook pass, Manu Ginobili, lefty, into, not a huge window. I mean, small enough. But the thing is, because if he waits that second, that window becomes bigger because because they're in an aggressive, there has to be a third man. This angle here, it's visible on my screen. The point guard is like at the beak of the hawk. So I mean, way out here. So he can't be the tag man just because like, that's just too much. So it has to be here. If he waits that little bit of second, suddenly this becomes a much easier pass. And I think that's just him trying to efficient out his like. See, look, he's already that right there. If he just waited that second, like, the ball's not meaningfully out of his hands right now. That's an easy left hand skip. I think he's avoiding it, and I think just with that extra second of processing,
or if he doesn't feel the lefty skip, he could just two hand overhead.
Yeah, which he loves two hand passing.
Yeah,
I think getting away from that, similar to what I talked about with Springer, with loving two hand finishing too much, or having a bio patterns that favor it. Oftentimes, so Cade is currently in the corner with his hands up, being like, "Throw me the ball." Didn't quite think about the aspect ratio on this one. Immediately ball gets swinged, he sprints up to get the shot. It's one thing to be a willing shooter, it's another to be a hunting shooter. And this is why I'm so excited to see how he processes now that he is now that he will be off ball. They're not expected to create so much of his have a more balanced shooting diet. Is like, I want to see how heavily he hunts some of these movement jumpers. I want to see, like, this is an intense sprint the second he sees it in tandem, and then the ball, like, this is a close closeout. I mean, he's close enough to touch him, and immediately out of his hands. I want to see what that looks like in a more balanced role.
And that's an easy release on what is one of the harder shots for a righty.
Yeah.
He's not. He's not totally turning against his body, but it's still a pretty, from pretty close to NBA range.
Yeah, and he didn't slide that, he sprinted that.
Yeah.
Like, if he slid that, that's really easy.
Yeah.
Here we get the last step. See how big this first step is, hips low. That's a big old stride from a big strider. And then he does the thing that drives me absolutely nuts. He pisses into the wind. That's where you're moving one direction and shooting the other. So, like, if you take this as a left-hand runner, your body is making sense. You don't have to calibrate, shooting into the wind, shooting against your momentum. He does this a fair amount. I just would love to see him get it out of the game. I generally don't, like, if you're going to do this, try to kill all your momentum. Otherwise, go to the lefty hook. You can see that I think the dig gets him to finish a little, or to pick up his dribble a little bit earlier. Again, he's moving to his left. If he was doing the same thing mirrored to the right, I think he gets another step in, and then instead of this being like a 4.5 footer, it's probably just a left hand or a layup. So the effective digs on his left hand is certainly an area, and then I think it results in just this weird finish that is bad, and not good. Getting those strides better, I mean, is also going to allow him to leverage his processing. Here we're going to get to see Pascal just take a wide step and manipulate the weak side defender, who's sort of doing something, but also doing quite a bit of nothing, which is visible on the second angle. Where you can see that, like, he isn't really covering anybody, and he's just trying to lightly show by moving, create the passing angle. You're able to do that. Obviously, we're talking about a shot versus a pass, but the ability to create new angles by having really violent last steps is a persistent theme for Cade. That's all about hip flexibility. That's all about ankle flexibility, and just having more strength in his legs. I feel like he's a little bit top heavy at times. And then just like getting some craft. I mean, like, this is a finish that RJ, gets a swipe in every NBA star's impulses to put their hands up so they can stay in the game and not get a foul call. And that makes a very easy finish when someone's like, "Hey, I'm not involved in this play anymore." I think that at times Cade can make finishing harder than it needs to be because he lacks some of this craft, and he lacks a definitiveness in his final step. Again, not for a guy who has trouble with getting around screens, he can occasionally put in master classes on closing big spaces. There's a little bit of chaff. He two steps this one nicely, gets around, and then long arms, the ability to track, gets one. This pass isn't super inspired. Throws the right one, but throws it a little bit behind. Again, this is it's one hand. I would love to see that in front. I know it's a small window on the front side. He does the safer thing, but getting that a layup turns this into a clean look. A little bit misplayed, but overall, a lot of positives on this one. Anything jump out to you there? I mean, am I nitpicking? Am I overly nitpicking on passing again?
No. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I'm not even, frankly, I'm not even sure there's really a window there for likely to do something productive with the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think he just went with the safe route or he missed.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with forcing somebody to take an extra step or two. It wasn't like he threw it so far behind that the play died.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go into another Iverson that blends into the high screen. This is the good in and out. This is the righty in and out where he tacks that top foot and gets like this is the version of Cade that I think if you are a believer in like him having this sort of usage style, obviously you don't want to probably be this intense. He gets, he changes.
Yeah. Sorry. That's the one I was thinking. Like we were talking earlier, and that's the play I was thinking of. Where, and the other thing to note about this one is he comes into the pick with a little bit of speed, so then he doesn't have to generate as much momentum to actually, make some sort of hesitation move because there's already some speed there.
Like it's a good succession. I just wish if he hesitates, like even it doesn't have to be a smitty, but just even a little bit at that decision point, he walks in for a layup. And I think that going from full speed to a decel, he's good at going from like mid speeds to low speeds. He does that very well. But I think he struggles with like going full speed down to like very low speeds and then accelerating again. Those ones still aren't comfortable for him.
I mean, I actually like the decision here. I don't like the decision here because he knows he's playing with people who aren't actually going to take and make this shot, but
it's the right decision for most contexts.
Yeah, like that. Like you're playing with an NBA 1 or 2. That's a 40-something% three. That's a big win of a possession.
Yeah, shot quality through the roof. Again, 2 feet in the paint on a high pick and roll. You're doing good things.
Yeah.
It's just there's some stuff. I think at the NBA level, that dig is not going to be as intense. So really playing with that particular decision point, like again, that defender was fully square to the basket. That's just not going to happen. Here we get sort of what happens when a defender is fully square with him. We sort of see the inverse of this, where he's going from pretty high speed to playing with multiple speeds and able to create a little bit of stop and start. And we can see there's an advantage created there. They're going to help over. And I believe he gets a pretty good look that potentially could have been called a foul. I know he finished this game with a good amount of free throws. That's an okay one. Again, I would like that to be lefty. I don't know how you feel about lefty. Where you fall on the lefty righty floater debate on whether people should be one-handed on anything outside of like 5 feet. There's a large coaching and training conversation about that. For me, this is close enough that like lefty here is fine. Like most people can be expected to turn out reasonable percentages, and the angle makes more sense than this. It's not fully against the body.
Or alternatively, do a little more like you've talked about this a little bit. Do a little more contact seeking here, because he's in a good spot. Like I think he can come back into Garrett a little bit and probably get himself to the free throw line.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly not something he's afraid of getting contact. Here, this is that like the finishing, the final steps package. He loves a tank finishes where you kind of get like a running back or if you've ever played Madden, hitting the Y button and you just get a whole bunch of points of contact on the ball so that nobody can rip it. The thing is he doesn't necessarily sell like other pathways. He doesn't like try to move the defender. He's just like, no, I'm gonna go be strong. And like he's a strong player, but he's not like NBA historical strong, which like is sort of what you have to be to do this without a sell. Even Giannis sells misdirections. Even Giannis is, trying to get some shoulder shimmy. Instead, Cade just like, I'm not going to get ripped and steps through. I just need to see a little bit more. Maybe that comes with flexibility. He gets a good shot in the NBA. I think that needs to specifically be a dunk.
Or again, take the defender's body.
Yeah.
Like, hey, take the defender's leap away and finish. Like the left hand finish there is fine, but again, come into the. It's actually funny that like thinking about that. There was a play in the playoffs this year. Was it in the playoffs? might have been late in the regular season. I remember like when Jimmy Butler was kind of giving RJ Barrett lessons on the court. Do you remember? The
Yes.
play I was talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's that exact play. Like, okay, you beat me, now come into me so I can't make the play, and that's exactly that situation there, where you just get your shoulder on him, and the guy can't make a play on this without fouling you, unless he's Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, I almost had a number of Dylan Brooks grift possessions there.
Well, I appreciate you not.
Yeah, but Dylan Brooks is very good at that. He's like skill set to various levels of rating. So this is an interesting shot versatility point. Cade knows that the defender, like that they're dropping the defenders fighting over. He has some space, but not a ton of space. And so like a hesitant shooter or I would say a developing shooter probably doesn't take this one because they're worried about the weak side contest.
Yep.
Like they can't, this might be a little bit beyond his peripheral. So the defender's sort of floating in question mark, who knows the distance. And you're playing, this isn't a random team, this is Kansas. Like Kansas is always going to have NBA approximate athletes. And instead of like looking around or, worrying about that at all, he's going to just flow right into a pull-up three, which is really inspiring. I know he takes a lot of pull-up threes, but just these circumstances where like he has outs. I think that like a reasonable coach would be like, I understand why you didn't take that. Yeah. We would prefer you do that, but I understand why you didn't. Instead it's just an instant pull.
That's I was just about to say that's the quick decision you were looking for earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like
these are the things that really speak to it's not just the percentages. Like if he shot 38 or 36%, like that'd have been fine. I'd have been cool with that. If these decisions weren't present, I would be more concerned. But because he is making extremely confident reads in small shooting, like the shot perception of knowing that like, there is a player trailing. Yes, there's a drop defender. I have to get the ball out super quick. No, I can do it. That stuff is so important of understanding where his skills lie. Weak side rim protection. It's not the full Mobley like spinning verticality where he like almost, there's a play in this, like I don't know if you've seen where Mobley basically does a 180 while doing verticality to mirror a defender who's like could have bounced off of him. But Cade like has real weak side rim protection ability, especially as he gets stronger, and he's able to meet a ton of different body types at the rim.
Yeah. I mean, your question earlier about like defensive role is, it is a facile comparison for a long wing who is not necessarily quick enough to be a point of attack defender, but like there's a lot of like Robert Covington stuff there.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, I kind of hate that's like a go-to player comp, but it's sort of unavoidable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are now getting to the point where defense has been appreciated enough that that like have broad archetypes that like I think that Rob is like sort of an archetype we're going to see more and more, and he's just the loudest version of it at hand currently. Like we're going to see players who are similar to Draymond. They're never going to be the specific combination of insane stuff that Draymond is. However, like there are going to be players who are within the multiple archetypes that sort of make up what Draymond currently does. And there's a couple in this draft who clearly were influenced by how Draymond plays.
By the way, that last play, he actually, this is a little bit what I was talking about earlier about, like, I think this is a foul. Yeah. And I think that like, go get to the guy's body and gets more of what, rather than try to like, go up and through a guy, which he can't do yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean this is better. I also love the angle he takes to try to get the foul. I just don't think he does it as intentionally of like, of like I'm going to get hit absolutely no matter what. Here we get a really good hezzy in the left. I don't know, like the defender is just so worried about him hitting this that he pops up way higher than he should, even though it's pretty far outside Cade's shooting pocket. Gets by. This is just one of the turnovers. I thought there's one like this that I think gets called a foul. It's one of the more ticky-tack ones, but I like the hints of how he understands leveraging this newfound gravity. Of hezzy gets pop up, it's three guys. Then that would be a great chance for him to really long stride out, try to get diagonal and sort of slither around the charge attempt. Again, ban the charge. We all know it's bad. We get it, but. I think this does show to like his small space slither is going to be a concern. Viewing him as a mega primary or just like a thing that his first team, like there's a lot of growth to be had there. Again, finishing stuff. This to me, this screams inverse Euro. Pound dribble hard inside left, then hop out right, and then you can extend out. And instead he kind of just like tries to go in and out. It's an okay look, misses. To me, this is just uninspired. I think that there's a ton of low hanging fruit for his finishing craft and for his finishing approaches. There's no reason this should not be a foul.
Yeah. And again, this is where just like being able to jump stop into a powerful finish there is a little bit of that strength that we're talking about.
Yeah. This is a fun one for me. This starts the series of plays where like Kansas is just like, under no circumstances will we be comfortable. We're going full like ears pinned back. I don't care what happens. Like challenge his handle as much as possible. And Cade responds by just going to a whole bunch of snake finishes. I don't know how you feel about this personally, but I've been talking about it a bunch. I'm a firm believer in when you're taking floaters, like as much as possible, try to die on them. So kill your momentum, force the big to help up because it'll spark your reads in the future. You just want to get them in the habit of stepping up rather than stepping out. And Cade does a good job of using that deceleration to just go straight up, straight down on these floaters. He does it with good touch. The argument against it is that it's harder to do the flob, where you're taking a floater and a lob at the same time, and the defender doesn't know if they can goaltend it or not. It's possible. I've seen Trey. I think I grabbed a clip of Trey doing the dead floater flob. To me, this is just a fun understanding of circumstance, knowing that, like, in college they're probably going to get you with that charge. Here's Trey, in dead to rights on a charge. This is 100% going to get called if he goes for the normal floater. Instead, dies. Falls over backwards for effect, which is a great way of beating charges, by the way. It has like a 90% effectiveness rate.
Can you do that when you're 6'8", 230, or does you have to be?
I don't know.
Tiny to be able.
I think if you told Braun he could do it, he'd do it. Yeah. Here's the above reference flob. He runs a little bit more on this one. I just like the reverse angle of the dunk a little bit better. But so now Kansas's spectrum is clear. Sit as low as possible. Get under his hips. Get into his handle. Try to push him left as much as possible. That's going to be the scouting report for, I think, his rookie year until he proves to beat it. I love that he immediately goes to snakes, though. I love that he knows that that's the solution. Gets a little bit under, a little bit uncomfortable. 1-2, 1-2, snake back. But he's able to collect fouls. And that's the difference between him and a lot of like sub-Luka guys, is that like when people are physical with you and you have either a suspect handle or you're really skinny, the impulse is to not want that. Like to be like, oh, I have to create a circumstance where these people can't touch me. I was recently at EYBL and I was talking with a coach. And he coaches a 5-star prospect in the class of 2023, who's really skinny. We were talking about, as a ball handler, there are the same levels of creative contact that we have for finishers. Where it's like, no, you don't want to just make violence. You want to make violence that works for you. So by setting up circumstances where like if people hit you, it will be a foul. Setting up circumstances where like, yeah, there's probably one dude who can give you real trouble. You know what it's your imperative to do is to sit that dude on the bench. So create angles, create everything you can, create the contact that makes the refs get involved. And he can go sit down, and this strategy will last for all of 2 minutes. And I feel like Cade has elements of that where he understands the angles, he understands how to use his body, and that like he can punish defenders and get the refs involved anytime people try to crowd him, because that's the clearest pathway for me, because the handle's going to take time. I'm very curious to see, how this translates in the league. Because like this works. Like they do fluster him a bit, and then he counters back by, bumping to then go into the snake. It's a foul call. Just normal stuff. Wing defending a 5, then showing perfect tracking to get a 1-2, try to get the vertical challenge, and then you can see him as he's landing thinking about the box out. Again, very normal stuff for a point guard presenting prospect to be able to fight in the post and then execute post positioning that would make Pete Newell smile. Look, as he's landing, he's looking for the box out. The ref blows the whistle, so obviously it doesn't matter. But the idea of somebody getting an offensive rebound on him really bothers him. Similar to Brogdon, he loves his offhand violence. So here, I think it's Christian Braun. is using his left to stabilize, so he's trying to like hand check him. And you should love this if you stop start with athleticism, because you simply just do the Mr. Miyagi circle to just like brush their hand off of you, and their momentum will be leaning forward, and then you just go by them. And Cade is really good at anytime somebody tries to hand check him, and like if they're just putting their hand out, it doesn't work. But they have to be pushing force to like actually hand check you in the 90s way, or they're trying to hold you from taking a corner. And Cade is just going to say, okay, like I'm going to use that force against you. Go pathway, gets downhill, gets fouled. Not my favorite finish. The two-hand hang is the two-hand tank where he finishes a little bit high. Works well, but it's just I would love to see this as a left-hand extension back to the middle because there's no secondary shot blocker. But that speaks to Slither, which is going to be an ongoing concern. Don't jump pass. It's bad. Especially when you know that people are loaded up on your options. It is a thing that drives me nuts. It gets tipped, it's turnover, and then Cade just hunts it, which is a great, get it right back. But yeah, Cade, it's a thing that happens. I don't think Cade is that guilty of it, but like with a lot of like big creators, they can jump pass to get extra advantage. But if you have to jump pass like every single time, like it's a sign that you're not good at seeing the floor. Cade just does it at times to get a better angle. Yes, it's a Dom jump path. I know. I didn't think of aspect ratio. Yeah, I just wanted to play this because I didn't have an exact moment for it in the stream. But it's just the ultimate example of slowing by people and just how like little technique wins. This is Mike Miller absolutely killing his when he was a coach at Memphis, just killing his guys with being able to just know where you're going at the right time. And the faces that the kid is making. Like the first time through, you watch Mike Miller screaming, and then just every time Mike Miller scores, just watch the player. This is 4-star, 5-star, and he's just not. He just can't get to spots. Mike Miller's old and his back doesn't work anymore, and he's cooking this kid on fakes. It's
left hand here on the first one. The left hand, just a little no, you're not.
Yep.
You stay there.
Yep. Little stuff. This kid just absolutely cannot believe it. Look at him in the background. Just absolutely uncertain how this could be possible. Yeah, that's the ultimate example of slowing by you. Is if you've ever played an older NBA, a former NBA player, they just know how to get to their spots so easily and slow down and use your aggressiveness against you. And Cade getting to that level where he is in full control of offensive possessions and plays within himself is going to be really important. All right. So we went a little bit long there, but this is the number one prospect in this class, so it's deserved. So the assist, still broken. This game did not fix the box score assist. However, I feel like we did a good job of talking through how that particular metric rated him out and how it's going to work in maybe showing this to be a contextual arrhythmia rather than a trend for him. You agree, disagree?
No, I agree.
Okay, I'm glad I can count on you in the assist crusades. All right, slowing right by you. I think promising, but not the established staple of he doesn't have the counters. He'll slow, but he doesn't have the slow to fast counter. He doesn't have the slow fast slow counter. I think that this is one of the higher potential areas within this game.
I think some of my favorite stuff from him is when he is coming, starting with a little bit more speed, and then that allows the change of speed, change direction. He doesn't, you've been calling it slither. He doesn't quite have sort of the languid, like you're a soccer guy, so if I say like the Kanu type stuff, he doesn't have that sort of what a soccer guy would call lazy skills to sort of drift by people. Yeah. So kind of a little bit more of changing speed because you have to have a fastball for the changeup to work.
Yeah.
And I think he's got more of a fastball than he shows sometimes. And I kind of wish that he would play in that higher gear just a little bit more,
Yeah. I think that's also really easy to scheme. That's my favorite thing. Yeah. Is that you can run him off sets where it's just like, okay, you're not on ball this time. You're starting with the head of steam. You're going downhill and you're running into a Nick screen.
Or double drags or something like that. Something that like gets him into the action with a little bit of pace.
Yeah, I mean, or like a DHO into a drag.
Yeah.
Where you just you run twin comets, and I mean, God, I've got the worst that I ever got hit with a screen was on that, where it's like a high a high DHO and the guards increase, and I'd just never seen anything like that. And some like 6'10" dude just gave me a forearm shiver, like the side of my neck, and I think I slid across the entire court. So the processing Olympics, I think that he's about as advanced of a guy processing that I've seen for this stage. Granted, this isn't the ideal context for a lot of his processing because he's not doing the thing that I think he loves to do, which is like judging an offense doing its peak thing and a defense doing its peak thing at the same time. A lot of times he's having to play a little more jazz than he's probably comfortable with. But you can see when moments where he knows the action that's happening. He's judging everyone's technique on how this flare is progressing, and he's just going through the checklist, just like okay, and they make mistakes. Like, all right, that's what we're doing. It leads to the delays at times that I've called that are nitpicky and set on unprofessional amounts of expectation.
Well, no, there are. I'm just saying there are real areas of possible criticism. And,
100%.
And some of those are like, oh, he's only a 9.5 there instead of a 10. It's like,
right.
Okay,
I mean, to be fair, I exist in this space the whole year, and so like I've been like, oh yeah, like Cade is the best, the best passer in this draft. He's one of the best passers for a size that I've really seen. Considering just the broad tool. And then in the past like 3 months, I've been like, yeah, Sharif Cooper's the best passer. So for me, every time that I say that I criticize him, I'm really I'm padding out a different form of angry DM I get, which is like you changed your opinion as new information came in. This makes you a fraud.
I think the while we're talking about processing, the fact that it is the same level on defense as is on offense is something that we've talked around it a lot, but in terms of his his, I don't know if you want to call it his floor or whatever as an NBA player, but these are things that are going to make him useful almost regardless of whether the other stuff were. Like, okay, if he becomes, I don't know, I'm going to go way back. If he becomes Derek McKee, that's not like you would have wanted more than that, but that was a really good player was a really versatile player on some really good teams for a long time. And having that combination of size and defensive attentiveness and processing already is a great thing to build from.
Yeah, I also think that at times we consider processing like a singular skill.
Yeah.
Like it even though like it makes some sense, like offense is about, exploring positive space, and defense is about, expanding negative. It's about like making negative spaces as thin as possible. And like you kind of think that they'd be, two sides of the same coin, but like it's an entirely different way of thinking. Like one of them is being creative and the other one is being as anxious as possible. Like, what if this happens? Well, this would happen. And then if this happens, I have to do this, that.
Well, here's a question for you: is which one do you think is creative and which one do you think is being anxious? Or is that
I think the defense is legitimately an entirely anxious proposal.
Interesting.
Because it's about worrying about possible futures in a way that you most likely can't control. Or on offense, like you are the team with the ball. You have some ability to dictate what is happening. On defense, like if a guy decides to start taking pull-up threes and you just have no ability to cover that, there's nothing you can do to prevent that from occurring. I guess you could always foul out of the game. The thing I've never done in frustration when I couldn't stop something. I don't know why you would ask that. So I think that also flows nicely to gravity versus attention versus spacing, especially as we think about translations. And I mean, I think that I'm going to save the Piston specificness of this because I would like to stretch out my utility for the year as much as possible. And getting a couple of days of post-draft coverage is really the best I can do before people relegate me to the seasonal dustbin of history. So I'll say that like I think it's very important to find him situations where you don't want to give him a ton of attention. I think the idea that he's full heliocentric is most likely incorrect because I think that his playstyle really wants to run offense. Like I think that he would be deeply unhappy as a basketball mind to run one floor flat every single possession. Because it's just not as fun as being like, oh yeah, so then we're going to run this flex screen. Then we're going to run a Spain action that flows into a DHO. But the DHO, and hear me out on this, is actually going to be a flare. Like the idea of processing all those defensive angles and all the mistakes defenses could make seems to be the thing that truly brings him joy, like in processing the game. So I think that like the idea, like, yes, he is a big creator who has a potential for game breaking shooting, but that's also not really his play style. And for me, that of the three, like, his gravity is going to be fine. He'll shoot at volume and he'll shoot off the dribble. The spacing, I don't have any concern for that for 95% of teams, especially if your primary or secondary can shoot. You're 100% straight on that.
Sure.
The attention
Also,
level is interesting.
Anywhere he's going next year, their team isn't close to finished. So,
Yep.
So that's, I don't want to say who cares because it's going to change the development context, but it's you're projecting forward to his third year to see what the group around him looks like.
I think that I would say it impacts his development context, but not in a way that, like, not in a fraught way or a like synergistic way. It's just like he's a normal basketball player in that respect. Like, yes, if you put him in a better situation, he'll most likely do better. But, like, not surrounding him by shooting clearly doesn't damage his draft prospects. So, like, if you put him on the most spacing challenge roster ever, like, he'd probably still figure out a pretty good way, because, like, he was a player who was thought to be a non-shooter, and now there is a reasonable case to be made that he may have the highest long-term shooting ceiling in this draft.
All the Corey Kispert fans just started crying, but
Kispert doesn't shoot off the dribble. Like, that I mean, if we're talking about just like shooting versatility,
fair enough. Yeah,
if you can't shoot off the dribble in college, the history of guys who shot not off the dribble in college and then off the dribble in the pros is extraordinarily thin, and I think it's just Joe Ingles. I can't.
So you mean the guys who could shoot? So it's not like Kyle Lowry, who doesn't count because he couldn't shoot at all in college.
Yeah, I'm talking guys who had a chop in college, and then in the pros added it. Suddenly added a second layer without changing their fundamental archetype. It's pretty rare. I think it's just Joe Ingles. Then the last one is best defensive utility, and I think for me, I would like to see him guard some small ball fives, mostly because I think that it would be really fun to watch him do the maestroing of a defense. I think that's very fun. I also think that it asks meaningful questions about inverting an offense in the way that, like, you initiate and like fully initiate, where you're making a huge amount of decisions, and then also taking the decision making burden on defense. That's fun. I don't know how much you could do it at a game, but just the amount of guys who can handle the intellectual calories burned by doing that has been so small in my time watching the NBA. And it's basically when, like, Braun, Magic, like it's just dudes who even could do that for 8-minute stretches in the playoffs. It's just so rare. Diao, I guess, for a time, but he never got like that super usage. Are there names I'm missing?
No. From a defensive standpoint, by the way, I just like thinking, Detroit context, and hopefully I'm not stealing some of yours, but like a let's get weird thing that might be interesting is like a zone with him and Jeremy Grant up at the top.
Yeah. At Montverde, a thing that him, Scotty Barnes, and let's say top 3 prospect in high school, regardless of class, Derek Whitehead, who I think you're going to love in his draft year. Were the only people who were allowed to blind double. So anytime that an opponent turned their back, they could just phantomly appear. Like, they would just appear. There was not a play call. It was their decision. And
so, like the 92 Scottie Pippen rules, basically.
But there were 3 of them, and the other 2 would have to eat their assignment. So whatever rotation they were making, they would have to fly over, and then the second one would fly over. Yeah, this is an insanely good high school team filled with NBA players. That is certainly something that you could do with that. Is anytime Jeremy Grant turns somebody, Scotty would, you could have Cade just auto double or auto dig over.
Yep. If you remember, though, it was something that Miami had pretty good success with in the playoffs 2 years ago. Was when it was Derek Jones, and I forget who was the other guy they were playing. I think it was Jimmy Butler with one of those guys being offensively not Derek Jones, that there's some interesting possibilities there.
100%. Okay. I'm going to grab a little bit of water, and come back for Q&A. You're welcome to join me if you'd like. I will see you guys in about 3 or 4 minutes. Let me jump over to the Q&A screen. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Let's do some Q&A. Uh, Brad notes that the Lazy Skills he's just titled the Berbatov. Berbatov is just outside of my soccer ability in terms of people that I've seen live. There's some people like I know they're good, and I've seen the highlight tapes, but
I've seen him live.
Oh,
So
that seems fun. He seems like he would be a draft a draft Twitter favorite just for all of the weirdness.
Yeah. The other Peter Crouch would be another one the draft Twitter might like, who's actually a very disturbing human being to watch in person. I was at a game in London probably about 10 years ago, and I was actually right on the touchline, and he was like, it's like standing very close to a small giraffe is the best way I can describe being on the touchline. He was going up and down the field.
So you're saying he shouldn't have hooped even though he tall as hell? To quote the seer, Scary Terry.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a question that's simply Draymond as one of the people who's played the 5 on defense and been a real primary mover, and I would say that Draymond was not the primary in that circumstance. Okay, let's get right into the real fun ones. Where do you think Cade ranks in prospects since Anthony Davis? I've recently given this answer, and I can do the whole rant if you'd like.
No, this actually came up in a Slack, which I believe you're a part of, but never actually grace us with your presence.
I respond occasionally.
Yeah, no, but this exact question came up today, and I think from the last decade or two, I think we kind of put him at around the median top prospect. I mean, this is something that kind of bugs me every draft season, is how every class instantly becomes the greatest class or better than you think or what. And it's like, no, he's he's fine as a top prospect. He's John Wall level at the top. I know that's not before Anthony, but still, like I think that's about where you'd put him, right? Amongst just looking at not necessarily top prospects, because DeAndre Ayton wasn't the top prospect, it was Luka, but just looking at the number one overall picks for the last 15 or so years, he's squarely in the middle as a prospect, I would say.
Yeah, I have a fundamentally different understanding of that.
Well, please.
So to me, I think that when I'm thinking of players as prospects, I'm just going to try to rehash this as much as I remember it, and in the fugue state that was me doing the dunker spot after streaming for 13 hours, which was a deeply unwise choice. I really could have said much worse things. I feel like I came off okay, considering it was a wonderful platform and a national one, but man, dangerous choice. So basically, if you are looking at the best prospects from the past like 10 to 15 years, you have to consider the NBA they come into, and you also have to consider like the reality of their negatives as much as possible. So like Zion has very serious health concerns. There are worries about whether he will play until the age of 30. The defense could be interpreted as being a tools based mirage. And while this wasn't my personal concern, there were ideas of is he a primary or not. For me, I saw him first for real in the Adidas circuit, where he was very much a primary, and I believe in the primary skills. All of those are really serious concerns. Like, you kind of can't be a generational prospect if you have that many question marks.
And I see where you're coming from. I don't totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Just because we're aiming at the right tail, and how big is that tail? Yes, there is for Zion, because of kind of the physical blow up factor, the lack of shooting, the defensive concerns. There were some pretty low end outcomes, and from a career longevity standpoint, there still are to some extent. But I mean, if what we're trying to do here is win an NBA title, which that might not be what everyone's solving for, but that's in my analysis what I'm always solving for. That a reasonable high end is, I don't know if you want to call it the 75th, the 90th, the 80th percentile outcome. What is that? I think that is sort of what we're talking about. I think when we're talking, because if a guy just sort of hits his median outcome, who cares? Not who cares. He can be a good player, but so go ahead.
No, I think that's a meaningful distinction for me. Like, if you are operating out of that distinction, it's not that Cade isn't one of the 5 best prospects in the past decade. It's that he's not the best prospect in this draft under that operation.
Okay.
Because 90th percent and Evan Mobley is a most likely better prospect.
That is, I think that's a pretty reasonable. And then you're doing the thing where you're kind of balancing the whole range as well.
For me, yeah. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's just, again, Mobley. It's sort of the wither, non-paint dominant big guys in modern NBA.
Yeah, I think that he'll be defensively paint dominant. In that 90th outcome, it's a pretty easy, like, just being scheme dominant and doing truly wild movement skills. Since having insane movement skills kind of goes two ways. Either you go the Willie Cauley-Stein where people will always believe that you could be something, or you turn out to be just transcendent. And I think that we're now getting to the point, that's the historical comp where it's really difficult to get them, because historically movement skills were not something that people really understood. So oftentimes it was just treated as an ingrained thing, where now we're going to have guys who are have great movement skills and kind of just turn out to be whatever, Andrew Wiggins, who's a fine NBA player, but just isn't his outcome.
Or I mean, more pertinently, perhaps Jaren Jackson.
Yeah, I'm still willing to hold off just because of the injuries, which are tough. But so for me, when I'm talking about best prospect, it's just who had the highest chances of just not being nothing. And I think there's chances that it having just true you swung and absolutely missed, not necessarily by a player's fault, but just life be happening.
Yeah.
I think that like that for me, like basically like there was no chance LeBron was ever going to be bad at basketball. There's absolutely zero nada. He also never gets hurt.
He's the best prospect of possibly ever. So like, I don't think that's hyperbole to say that
no. I think that Wilt maybe.
Yeah, that's
it's
fair.
probably better.
But like Wilt is like the playing in a it's the population Wilt was playing against was very different than the one LeBron is. So that's almost like you almost have to treat that as a different sport.
Yeah, I mean, he just would have if there were league average numbers. Dear God, the things that he would have done. For me, if you the way that I understand prospects, to me, Cade is most likely the best since Rod.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Just like, but that's again, this is a semantic argument.
No, I see what you're saying because again, Cade, like I think that is of a piece with what I was just saying at the end of the stream about like his defensive processing, and I don't really like using like the floor terminology because what people are describing as the floor is almost never the floor. But it does make that whatever sliver of bust there is there, it does make that smaller for him than a lot of other players because it's going to be hard for him to be just really bad.
Yep. Okay. I feel like if you would like to hear my further thoughts on that, I recently did the dunker spot, or I didn't go as far as to say that thing I just said, which I said on more sleep, which is pretty tough. Yeah. Question from Roe Chicken. How do you become a genius like you guys and not fall for draft smoke screens?
No. I think we can probably both go through a number of guys who we thought were going to be great and were.
Oh, he means like pre-draft stuff where like people say like San Antonio is. I'm hearing that he's going for here, like agent machinations, teams trying to jockey for positions. How do you not fall for that?
By just not caring.
Yeah, I would say that assume everything that like basically if you pretend that everything you're going to hear from now until the names get called is a lie and a bold-faced lie by people who are lying liars, then you don't fall for stuff.
I resent that remark. No, it's fair. No, I think to the extent that you see something like that stuff comes is back when teams were more open about who they were working out, which by the way, the state secret stuff around who you're working out bugs the crap out of me. If I can soapbox for a minute, it's an entertainment product. People are interested in this. Why are you denying them? Like we brought a guy in for a workout, therefore, like there's like the possibility that someone gains some sort of competitive advantage by knowing that versus what the league as a whole is costing themselves by, hiding this kind of stuff. Looking at you, Sam Presti, is like it's one of those things where he begs or really just demands the what are we doing here question. So, but those were like, I think in situations where that was sort of widely available, I think you probably could gain some information about kind of, if not where players are going, at least kind of the ranges where people thought realistically they were going, just because where the agent lets a guy work out and which teams are asking guys to work out and how that sort of plays out. But sadly, we don't have enough information to do that anymore.
Yeah, I also think that it was a lot easier to pretend the state secret stuff worked before like the modern media landscape, when now it's just like every player just takes pictures and their agent DMs everybody. That's like I don't think I'm putting myself on a pedestal to say that I have been reached out to by many agents or agent adjacent people to be like, hey, have you heard that this happened? And I was like, well, I did now because you just told me. That be happening during the draft cycle. It's really difficult.
You're an influencer.
I resent that remark and wish you had never said it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the question was about the Raptors and how do you not fall for it, and the answer is like the thing that I have said about living at the top of the draft is that everything that you know publicly is because somebody wanted you to know it. And if you assume that you as a person who's not working for a team or just like a general person consuming this entertainment product, that like it's all a work, and if you try to see past kayfabe, you will drive yourself insane. See my current life. So yeah, I just think that there's nothing to be gained and simply going in with your opinion, unless you have somebody with some real juice telling you exactly what's going to happen. And for the most part, just like enjoy the city. B-Ball Dan says, Seth, what do you think of Kevin Pelton's statistical model projection that had Alperen Şengün at number 1? 4 questions.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of projection systems haven't totally caught up to how to best value bigs in today's day and age. I can't claim to be, chapter and verse conversant in them, but there's some fairly obvious how's that work at a high level question. And so even though the statistical translations match up to things that have worked in the past, there is a degree to which those things have worked in the past in a past version of NBA basketball. And that's one of the harder challenges in sort of draft modeling is what is your sample? You want the sample to be deep enough that it's meaningful, but if you go back too far, then you are basically like you're almost training a model on two different games.
Yeah.
And there's I don't like that's one of those things where it's art, not science, and I don't have a good answer for how you know that. I just you can as something I've come around to is that because it has become harder for the level of special a big needs to be a real difference maker is, I think, just higher. And so that makes and I think that's been a meaningful change. And so I don't know if the systems have totally caught up to that.
Yeah, I haven't had time, unfortunately, to dive into Kevin's model and its projections. The thing that I will say about using like league average scores as like league relative scores is that factoring in COVID is extremely difficult, especially for import leagues. And I think that may have had some effect, but again, I have been.
That's a fair point as well.
Yeah, like the Turkish league is an import league, not being able to, because of COVID affecting ticket sales, obviously, and just general income, not being able to afford imports, not being able to afford imports, especially for bigs, means the type of guys who are most likely to give him trouble are not present. Again, I cannot speak to the model since I haven't sat down and spent time with it because I streamed way too much yesterday and worked on this all day today. But I would think that it has some implication beyond what you say, which I think is pretty universally true, is that bigs who do killer stuff, and I think we were robbed of this because we were robbed of the Contra season at Kentucky, where he would have absolutely completely murdered people. Like, Cantor is so good. I pronounce that both ways so that people don't yell at me either way. He was so good at Hoop Summit, he would have just done vile things to the SEC, and I feel like that would have been a really useful data point for international bigs in their translation to college basketball.
To college basketball, but then also like what it means for a sort of a below the rim center, like how that then like propagates into the NBA. I think is sort of. And that's obviously that's an impossible comparison to avoid.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, I mean, it seems as natural as comparing one of the Plumlees to another. Like that's just how it feels. Like it's like obviously there's importantly there are huge differences between the Plumlees.
Yes.
But what are you going to do but compare them to each other?
Well, there are the Zellers exist.
Yeah, I feel like they don't quite reach the threshold, There's more variance between the Plumleys than there are the Zillers.
Fair.
Okay, that's all I was pointing out. Mr. Hugh asks, what would you do if Sharif fast pulse falls past 28? I will commemorate the occasion with a hearty yell of frustration. How much of Sharif Cooper have you seen? And do you have an immediate emotional reaction to the idea that he may be a second rounder?
Is that a question for me or for you?
I was just asking you before because I can.
I've mostly consumed Sharif via kind of mixtape. Obviously seen like some cut ups of I forget like his first game back, and it's just like wow.
Yeah. That is versus Alabama.
Yeah. Not a bad team to reintroduce yourself against, and not the first star turn a rising prospect is made against Alabama. If you remember back a couple of years ago, that was Jaws coming out.
Yep,
was the early season game against. I actually still remember where I watched that game with one of our scouts, and there was definitely a couple plays in that game where we had to like walk around the office and get people to come watch with us for a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, this guy, he's the second best player in this draft, and that's not going to change all year.
Yeah, that was his first season as Jaw, because across everything the previous year he's labeled Demetrius.
No, he was Jaw the
I just mean in stats queries he comes up as Demetrius.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm giving anything away by saying he was Jaw in ours in our database for the whole time. But yeah, anyway.
So for me, I think I'll be very frustrated if Sharif falls past 28, but that also means that there's a higher likelihood of like the team that buys it on him understanding. I mean, I've from draft night been big on the idea that this is going to be a wild one. For me, I would, if I were the Toronto Raptors, I would be strongly considering Sharif Cooper. So the idea of getting a player with 2 superlative skills for this draft, and I would say 1 superlative considering my time evaluating the draft, is an awesome player to get at 28. And I also think.
Okay, I'm sorry. You were. I thought you were talking about 4, and
I am.
Wow.
To be clear, I am.
Oh, you are okay. Wow.
I believe shooting to be the most easily fixed of the skills, and he's probably 6'1". Like at a certain point, just like he's going to get 2 feet in the paint no matter what.
That's is shooting the most easy? I don't know.
That's a thing I believe about skill.
Okay. I feel like that's the one that's the one that people talk themselves into more often than anything else. Well, it's not just if he shoots it; it's when he shoots it.
Yeah,
is
great touch indicators.
Yeah.
But also name the last player who didn't shoot on ball, who didn't have a thing going on. So not Keller or Ben.
That's fair.
So do you think he has a thing? Because if the answer is no, then I think it's pretty fair to forecast some pretty serious shooting improvement. Even if you're not a big.
I guess if shooting is going to come, you're thinking something like Ty Lawson.
Yeah, I mean,
is that sort of where?
Yeah, I mean, he's a much better passer than Ty Lawson.
No, but Ty Lawson was had that the top end speed, and because of that he never. I mean, he shot a set shot for his whole career, but he was a good set shooter, and maybe that's all he needs because of the everything else. So sure.
Yeah, I don't find there's a star pathway there, and there's not that.
No,
If we are following the best prospect logic that you laid out earlier, and you're hunting for those tail end outcomes, then Sharif has a terrifying tail end outcome that could really be something. And at that point, it's not like everybody else at 4 doesn't have interesting pathways.
And if nothing else, he's going to sell some tickets.
if nothing else, he's going to do cool stuff. I guess to continue conversations about good passing as people hold up terrible signs about LeBron. Who do you prefer as a passer? Cade or Josh Giddey? Thank you for any answers. Cade. Giddey is one of the wildest passers I've ever seen, and that like he throws things I've just never seen people try before. Like he throws like double wrapper, like he's thrown behind the backs behind other people's back. Like the defender will be trailing him, and he'll throw behind the back that wraps around both, and I'm just like, what? How could you possibly think of that as a reasonable kick out? Like it's one of those like I'm not even mad, I'm just impressed, and I'm excited to see how that like handles NBA space. But I think Cade is just a better processor. Giddey's flash moments are so much flashier because like in terms of just passing, not just because it's like it's fun, but also like the Dali sense of like, and how did you get here is very tough to shake.
Those are the way you talk about this is different than the way I think about it, because I mean, earlier you were making you were kind of making the Sharif Cade distinction where you're talking about like the passing as one thing and then the sort of the frame to enable it as another. And it's hard for me to separate the tool from the functionality. Yeah, so from a functional standpoint, it's hard to get to a spot where even though kind of, wow, he has a deeper bag of passes, but I'm not part of bag Twitter when on scores. Why would I be on passers?
Yeah, I think that people who see the game a foundationally different way do have unique pathways of development. That's why I bring it up. It's not like, oh, he can throw this one specific fun pass. It's like he's done things that I would call like post-impressionist passing. And I'm just like, there's things there. I can't really define them because I've never seen somebody try to, like, there's times where he tries to throw it through humans, like physically. He's just like hoping for a state change. I'm like, I have no idea what you saw there.
Brownian motion.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm excited to hear what you thought was there because I like needed explained to me because you didn't throw a normal turnover. Like,
right.
So like that's what I mean. Like when I say that, I'm sort of referring to like the idea that maybe there's more there in how he's processing the game. Where Cade is pretty like, I don't want to say he hoops like an accountant, but like he's definitely like sort of running a data table of some sort as he makes decisions. And Giddey is, I don't think that there is that perception at all. He's very much like, this seems tight, why did you paint, like I assume you've seen the Vine where the child is painting is using chalk to paint a brick blue, and his parent asks like, why have you done this? And he responds, because blue is effing tight. And it's like, yeah, I got you 100%.
As the father of a 5-year-old who's discovering that markers on his face is awesome.
Yeah.
I can relate.
Okay. Question: who would you rather have, Shea or Cade? I assume we're talking about like Shea at this moment with his current contract, or Cade as a draft prospect.
So this is interesting because again, this is coming up in context of like some anonymous scout saying some wild things about like Mobley and Jalen Green relative to Shea, and it's just like there's reasons to prefer either of those players to Shea. In terms of their median outcome, it's lower than what Shea is now. Yeah. So like, if you're aiming for upside. Yeah, you want that, but to treat it as ridiculous that you would prefer kind of the bird in the hand of Shea to that is, I think is mistaking kind of the differences in where teams can be in their development cycle. With Cade, I think that because of the stuff you've talked about and the stuff in terms of his floor and distribution of outcomes, I think we'd both agree that we would probably rather have Cade.
Yeah, I mean, I'm that I really don't care about contracts.
Yeah,
it's just a thing that like I find there's so much in basketball to do. And it's just like contracts are just a thing that do not latch on for me. I understand the functionality of like separating max and non-max players, but beyond that, I'm just like, yeah, I mean, if you're arguing among max players, you're talking about relatively the same thing, and like the time served is more like, can you keep this dude happy? I think it's Cade just because like
I'm not even saying that, by the way. I'm not even.
Oh
like,
no, I'm just talking
yeah.
about me in general because
Yeah.
like, some people
No,
are here for you and may not be familiar with my
yeah,
brand
no,
of idiocy.
I'm not even really from a contractual standpoint. It's just again from, Shea doesn't have a ton of top 5 equity anymore. Like he's got a ton of top 25 equity, top 15, but I don't think I'm being too harsh by saying like there's not like the chances of him being like a multi-time first team all NBA player are pretty low at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could say the counterfactual argument being like basically nobody has ever had the self-creation season he had, and if he can start to shoot a volume, certainly interesting stuff there.
And the counter to that would be like fake games in a weird season. But yeah, I mean, we could go.
He is a better shooter than Trae Young statistically, considering their full sample from college to here. Just saying, by like a pretty considerable margin. If we're just talking about fake stuff. Okay.
You're trying to get me in trouble.
I'm just stirring the pot in any way I can. So I don't think I have a top 5, but other who would you say are like other pantheon teenage processors? Braun is obviously there. Chris Paul is there. Luka. And then let's see if I can get a 5. I'm trying to find a weird one. I mean, like Mobley is certainly potentially up there. Mobley's a little bit more difficult because at times I think he over processes.
I'm trying
to find a lower end guy who like it was just really well seeing the floor and understanding the way that the game worked.
I mean, I could like the name that popped in my head when that question was, and this is going to date me, but Daron Sheffer.
Yeah, that doesn't do anything.
He was a Israeli point guard for UConn in the 90s, who was like he's 6'5", not super fast, pretty good wingspan, but it was just like, the epitome of got to the spot where the ball was going to be early. And, if I remember correctly, had really good steal rates despite not being a burner, and, all those kind of things that we would know now represent a guy who sort of, and then it just like, I don't even think he ever tried to make the NBA. I think today he would have been a legitimate prospect, but at the time he was like slight and slow and overseas prospects, especially guard prospects, weren't considered the way they are today.
Yeah, but certainly didn't have the field of people like myself who just run random stats queries on whatever pool is available. There's a question of what's a processor. It's not Intel related. No, processing is just a way of saying like making the right decision over and over again. So like judging the angle of where a defender's closing out, understanding the way that their coverage is working. It's sort of a way of saying a person who is doing feel well. Yeah. There's just not really a way of saying like he's a great feeling guy. Sounds creepy.
I mean, from a teenage standpoint, is it illegitimate to bring up Tim Duncan here?
Yeah, I just didn't see teenage Tim Duncan enough.
He was. Like
Rubio.
This was. Well, yeah, that's a good one too.
Draymond is weird because there's not that much tape of him in high school.
And also with Draymond, the sort of the physical ability was sort of cabined by the conditioning factors until much later.
Okay. We have a question of how did Jalen Green's stock rise over Mobley after playing no games and the lottery just happened? I think this is you, former league employee who's able to speak to the dynamics at play here.
I mean, it's hard. It's kind of hard to think of a prospect for whom a 1-on-0 workout would be more advantageous than Jalen Green.
E. Jianlian.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. The people of Milwaukee have moved on from that. The championship has allowed them to forget the
right. That just means we can make the joke, and they also laughed now.
Yes, exactly. I mean, they would have laughed anyway.
But it doesn't sting anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's the tools over the basketball is a kind of generally going to favor the wing prospect, and this is a very physically toolsy player. And then I was having a conversation with someone earlier today who opined that there's going to be a lot more. Well, in the interview room, he was really impressive stuff from this year because there's been just less opportunity to pick up on those, whether they're real signal or just things that people see and latch onto, like the sort of the contextual clues about like a player's personality and work habits that you'd get by showing up 2 hours early at a game. So I think there's a lot of sort of a lot of the places where bias can creep into the draft decision sort of almost militate towards Green over Mobley, and it's exacerbated this year.
Yeah, I will also say that the weirder a season is, the more likely that agents will have an outsized influence. And agents are capable of, setting up workouts where players look better, or, it's just one of those things. I think that, aesthetic biases, expectations, and the idea that like star paths are routed in like a specific style of on-ball juice are all things that that result in players jumping without having games played, along with workouts.
Yeah, no, but in workouts in general, like are like, again, if you look at these three players, like Mobley, Cade, Jalen Green, in any workout setting, Jalen Green is likely to exceed expectations more. I mean, workout like even a full 3-on-3 workout is not a big friendly environment.
I mean, if you are a high level processor and you are doing a pre-draft workout, what drills are you supposed to do that scream pop? Like, what is like, right. Okay, like if you're athletic, you can do it East Bay. Yep. Like you can pull out some wild stuff.
Yep.
There is no way of simulating some of the equivalent pop level, the same like wow factor of some of the reads or closeouts that Evan Mobley has made. You basically can't simulate in a one-on-one workout. It's just not. Yeah. It is not
in a 3-on-3. Maybe you get some of that, but that's again relative to expectation. Like the player who, I mean, I was already kind of in the tank for this player, but then the skill level and the level of on ball decision making was Bam.
Yeah,
oh my goodness, yes. Like 3 trips up and down the floor, and then a couple possessions of 3-on-3, and it's just like, how do we trade up to get this guy? But again, that's sort of very specific skills that you didn't know a guy had because of his college context, rather than a guy popping with something you already knew he had. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no way of setting up the basic equivalent. Like there's not a way of like creating the leverage. That's the word I'm looking for. The leverage required for doing that sort of thing. Sorry, I'm having some issue with chat. Creating the leverage. It's giving me a person's profile, and I'm trying to figure out how to make that go away. Okay. I see a question about scroll up. I had to do this in another window because I had some weirdness. Laro, the answer is Nikola Jovic, who's the only player I've ever seen to clone Tatum's game. He just spent all the time on YouTube. There's no player that will ever be more like Jason Tatum than Nikola Jovic. Okay, next one is can you speak, this is from Silk Pajamas, who asks, can you speak to Mobley and Suggs not working out with Houston? Why does this happen? Does this implicate? The question is, I think the Rockets should take Mobley, but the situation seems odd. So why do players not work out for teams? Is there a secondary motivation? How does this play out? In behind the scenes.
So there's some of it is, one of the more famous recent examples was Porzingis not wanting to go to Philly, and just sort of basically ducking them at any purpose because he did not want to go there. So that's one thing. The other is there is workout season is grueling. There was a player we had in at one of our last workouts. I want to say it was in 2018. Who we were pretty high on, had a terrible workout, and then one of the trainers was talking to us afterwards, and in a workout setting, the trainers are very important because first of all they get pretty good. They probably get a better unvarnished sense of the personality. Most high-level prospects are reasonably well coached by their agents to perform in the interview room now. So getting kind of the real when they're talking to like a trainer or someone on the medical staff. But it was like, wow, he was telling us this is his 14th workout this month.
Yeah, and especially we also have to note there are limitations with some guys like traveling. If they have members at risk, they're like, yeah, I'm not doing workouts. I'm not traveling to go shoot in an open gym for you and potentially put people at risk for. Yeah, this year specifically, I've heard more from people being like, yeah, I'm not doing that, not because I don't want to go here, just I'm not doing that, period. If you want to watch it on Skype, I will gladly send it to you.
And to some extent, if they're the relationship between the decision maker and the agent might be such that okay, level with me. Is there any chance you're taking my guy at 2? Yeah, no, we're not. And or if there isn't that trust there, it's bullshit. You're considering him at 2. Get the film from someone else and we'll talk. But there's a lot of that sort of. The soft skills of relationships really do come into play in terms of getting guys in for workouts.
Yeah, and some guys will only work out if certain other players are there. Certain players
if certain other players are not there.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Yeah. Every certain times they're like, hey, we would love to go, if you're a guard who has handle issues, and they're like, oh yeah, we brought in this West Virginia guard. Cancel. Throw your phone in the ocean. So
Javon Carter is going to be there.
Yeah, just oh, that's crazy. I've perished actually. I'm no longer on this ethereal plane. Okay. So I think this is a good one to end on. It's a question from Francis, who asks wonderful questions and is a true gift to every stream he steps in. Do you believe that Cade's proficiency at micro skills, that he doesn't have to be good at? Oh, no, I get this question now. Do you believe Cade's proficiency at micro skills that he doesn't really have to be good at makes Cade more likely to develop in general than the average ball handling prospect? So does this coterie of strange micro skills make it more likely that he will become a better ball handler?
I don't. I mean, you're the micro skill guy. How intentional are those micro skills?
I think that all the micro skills come from the context that he's played in.
Yeah.
So there's one left-handed pass that he has because they started his AAU team, Texas Titans, started with a specific weave play to get Greg Brown a lob, and it almost always came on the left side. So he has a left-handed push pass that he can make out of a pretty full-speed dribble because he got it consistently. And that is a pass that he has. And mob vert is a lot of things. It's also a really specific context. So all of its guards can shoot off shakes. They all have a specific form of closeout that they're really good at. I think his micro skills are a good series of tattoos that explain where he's been.
That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, a tattoo is more positive than scars.
Very, very Maui from
I think that ball handling is the hardest skill to develop. Broadly, movement skills are just much more difficult to teach a guy to move in a different way. I don't think there's any amount of training by anyone that will turn Cade into Bones Highland in terms of the ability to move. It's not physically possible.
He has joints and Bones doesn't.
Yeah. There is a prospect I will show you in the 2024 class that you will love. Just a mutant in terms of movement skills. A 6'6" as well. So I think that it makes it more likely because it creates a lower threshold of what he has to clear. Like, I mean, again, if you're a 6'7" ball handler, you just have to be less good at dribbling than a 6'2" guy does because you just have other pathways of success. So I think that Cade's proficiency of micro skills and also like how loud they are, but it allows for him to soak up usages that aren't just like, hey, get by somebody off the bounce. So I think that it means it's more likely that he will reach the thresholds of being it, but I don't think it means it's more likely to develop because those are, underlying questions like, proprioception, anti-coordination, and general flexibility that are much harder to predict because we just don't have the insights into those things broadly right now. In 5 years, we most likely will, just because the conversations around coaching and skill development have advanced. I'm not saying we'll have answers, but we'll have more insights.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we'll solve handling. I'm saying that the conversations in cultural mores have moved much closer to having conversations about how skill development impacts those things, as opposed to now where it's more like, oh no, man, some people can handle, some can't. That's like sort of the best scientific.
Give them their vitamins, and some guys get better.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that we're in a better place culturally than we were 5 years ago, and I feel like if we have this conversation in the year 2026, I will have a much more informed answer that is backed by more than this is what I believe, from judging from my own firsthand experience and some secondhand experience interviewing coaches and people that I trust. That's where I am currently. I don't love that that's where I am, but I'm hoping that as I get access to more information and the ability to synthesize it, from having conversations like these, that we can get to a better place and push the culture forward. So I promised you that you would have a chance to plug the gesamte Werke that you've put together.
I'm sorry, what?
It means masterpiece, an epoch-defining masterpiece. German language is
God, that's nothing to live up to there. No, I mean, hopefully, if you came to this stream via me tweeting it out, then I have a book coming out in November called The Mid-Range Theory, which I think if you'd enjoyed this discussion, it is along similar lines of a lot of aspects of basketball from very specifically my point of view, which is from an analytics and probabilistic way of thinking about the game and the language we use and how that sort of creates narratives that kind of propagate through the history of the game and where we've been previously through the combination of rule changes and skill development, and yes, the application of analytics have changed the game over the last 20 years. So yeah, I don't know if that sounds like something that might be interesting to you. Please buy it. Available anywhere books are sold. Bookshop.org to support your local indie bookseller, and it's available for pre-order now.
As a person who has indeed pre-ordered, I suggest you do that. Real friends pay full price. Big believer in that. If you are interested in supporting me, the biggest thing you can do right now is following me on YouTube. I'm very, very close to monetization, and that would be very large, considering that I do have a sizable back catalog of streams for this cycle, and I am in the process of uploading the marathon stream, which consumed all of my yesterday and most of my sanity. That is going to be up in the next within the next 24 hours. Every piece of it will be up. So it'll be viewable, and you can jump around and see what you like. We had so many fantastic guests, and about every possible viewpoint from every different sort of experience, from guys who played their entire lives, who coaches, people who train, people who are more analytically inclined, people who came here from Twitter, people who do day to day, people from the ops perspective. We got basically everything, and I think that's the thing I'm most proud of. If you have extra currency laying around, if you've hit some scratchers or come into a bonus, my Patreon is free for all to read, but I sustain myself with the donations from kind viewers like you. that website has changed my life. I cannot be thankful enough for the people who do support me, and we have things like this because of it. A lot of people I'm using because of it. So yeah, ever thankful for patrons. And if you would like to be one of the ever thanked, would really appreciate it. I'm working for a company called Cerebro Sports, where I do writing, data, or metric building, and consulting. If any of those sound interesting to you, we have a draft guide that I wrote that explains using box scores and weighting and a number of fun adjustments to have a better understanding of developmental and scouting archetypes that can be done pretty quickly and understood by anybody. As I explained to some septuagenarian coaches at UIBL Peach Jam last week, and they seemed to get it. So I think that I did a pretty good job. If I can explain some tendency metrics to guys who like did dances to doo-wop. I don't know. Feels like something. I just want to say thank you so much for
It's a good band name. Dances to doo-wop, yeah.
It feels like, it also feels like a chapter to a film. Black screen, white text, tasteful font. Thank you so much for coming on. I truly appreciate that you sacrificed 2+ hours of your evening to talk about a draft prospect. I know your time is valuable. I just want to say thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, I thought you were thanking the people for watching. No, this was my pleasure. I was actually I was hoping for the entire cycle that you'd ask me to come on, and I was quite chuffed to get to come on and talk about Cade with you.
Well, this is the great way to close out the cycle. I'm going to have this up on YouTube within the hour. So if you coming in late, I will have this up. Thank you to everybody. Have a wonderful evening.